This is what the future looks like. A fully electric car that's cheap to recharge and promises to emit zero carbon emissions. But powering this Tesla requires more than electricity. You need a hefty 200 kilograms of minerals like copper, cobalt, lithium and nickel. And those minerals have to come from somewhere.
It's absolutely ironic, but to save the planet, we are going to need more mines.
Top of the list are 35 so-called critical minerals, which will help power the clean energy revolution.
Ideally, we'd have a battery in every house and big panels of batteries everywhere, which means cobalt, nickel, rare earths, lithium, they're immensely needed for the future. These are all critical to a green economy. So these are called green metals.
The world is scrambling to secure supply of these metals, which are mostly controlled by China.
China has always known the value of critical minerals. We're moving into a period now of geopolitical competition. Everybody is looking for the leverage. The Chinese are quite explicit about that.
Mineral-rich Australia is in the driver's seat to challenge China's dominance.
Rare earths, critical minerals, everything you use for electric vehicles, for transport, for manufacturing. We're really at the start of what could be a new mining boom.
Not everyone is convinced. Environmentalists fear some of Australia's most pristine wilderness is facing a major new threat.
And we will not stop.
Do you accept that we might need a short spike in mining in the next 10 or 15 years to allow us to save the planet?
No, it's not saving the planet. That's ridiculous. That is green spin, green extractivism coming out of the mining industry.
There's no question we have some tough decisions to make. And this view that the green view is anti-mining is naive, because if we're going to go green, we're going to have to get a bunch of these critical metals, and we're going to have to do it smartly, and we're going to have to produce a lot of them.
Broken Hill is the birthplace of BHP. Just like the world's biggest miner, this historic town is making the shift to the minerals needed for green energy. Behind me here, they're building a new mine, not for coal, but for cobalt, to take on an industry dominated by China. Tonight on Four Corners, we examine how cutting carbon emissions will require one of the biggest increases in mining the world has ever seen, and how going green means getting our hands dirty. On the outskirts of Canberra is a futuristic building dedicated to Australia's natural resources. In these aisles are thousands of samples of minerals found all over the country.
You can think of it as the National Archive of all the geological material that we've collected over decades, things like rocks and drill core. And the interesting thing is that many of these drill cores and rocks that we've got in here could actually contain critical minerals or information about them that will help set us up for the future.
Alison Britt is a geologist at the government agency Geoscience Australia. Right now, she's focused on what are known as critical minerals.
So a critical mineral can be described as an element, metallic or non-metallic, that's got two characteristics. One, it's absolutely essential for modern technologies, our economies, or even our national security. And two, there's a risk, either real or perceived, that its supply chains could be disrupted.
Control of these minerals will determine who leads the next industrial revolution, dominated by the switch to green power.
So, generally speaking, in today's world, you can't make a modern wind turbine without rare earths. You can't make a solar panel without high-purity quartz. And you can't make an electric vehicle battery without vanadium, manganese, graphite, cobalt and lithium.
How much is demand set to grow over the coming decades for these critical minerals?
You look at the numbers they're predicting and you think, oh, that can't be right. Yeah, these are staggering numbers. So the International Energy Agency's report looks at the stated policy scenario, what countries have said they're going to do. And they're predicting that our cobalt use will be up 6 times, our graphite 8 times, and lithium an amazing 13 times. And that is just the conservative numbers.
This is not just some abstract concept. Every piece of technology you own, your iPhone, an Apple computer, your TV, relies on these minerals, and that demand is only going to grow.
If we would like to continue and have a familial lifestyle, cars, houses, etc., really there's only one answer, and that's to electrify pretty much all of the end-use things we do. Electrify the cooking, electrify the water heating, electrify the vehicles, and we've got to power that with a huge amount of renewables.
It's absolutely ironic, but to save the planet, we are going to need more mines. You wouldn't think it possible, you wouldn't think that's sensible or reasonable, but that's actually the fact of the matter. We will need more mines to save the planet.
King Island, off the northern coast of Tasmania, is a favourite of foodies and golfers. It has a global reputation for its cheese and beef, oysters, kelp and crayfish.
Pretty nice King Island cray, probably about close to 4 kilo I reckon.
It's remote, rugged and going green. The wind turbine behind me helps to power King Island. To build one of these turbines requires 8.5 tonnes of critical minerals like copper, zinc and nickel. That's 3 times more minerals than a coal-fired power station needs to generate the same amount of energy. It just shows the sheer volume of minerals we need to dig up. And one of the most valuable minerals is found right here on the island. This tungsten mine, shuttered 30 years ago, is about to reopen. In February, politicians and shareholders flew in for the reopening and the compulsory turning of the sod.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, this is an auspicious event for our company, for King Island and for Tasmania.
It was an unlikely setting for a tutorial in strategic affairs, but that's just what guests received from their local member.
Recently in Europe, Russia, Ukraine, in China, navigation rights in the South China Sea has brought a geopolitical increase in tensions around the world. And we need, as a country, as a government, we need to have a very good grip on where our minerals, our resources and our vital pieces of equipment are, because we don't want them held by a particular regime or used against us.
I now hand over to Group 6 Metals' Executive Chairman, Mr. Johan Jacobs.
Thanks, Chaz.
Johan Jacobs is the head of the Australian company Group 6 Metals, which owns the mine.
Critical to the Western world. Certainly the geopolitical situation that has emerged over the last couple of years is certainly very important for the way that we have financed the mine and been able to get it to the point where we are now under construction.
Once back in production, the mine will produce tungsten, classified by the US and Australia as a critical mineral. It's one of the 35 minerals now seen as vital for economic and national security.
Tungsten's a great metal. It's really hard. It's superheat resistant, and it's also very good at conducting electricity. And so we put it in our computer chips and our electronic components because it will not overheat.
China currently controls 80% of the world's tungsten. This pit will provide an alternative source. And fearing Beijing's dominance, the US is taking a keen interest in the mine.
How many meetings would you say you've had with representatives from the US Embassy here?
Probably 3 over the last 12 months. And those discussions are continuing. At this stage, they don't have any financial interest, but they certainly are very keen to see us progress and develop the mine because it's another supply chain from a friendly nation.
For locals on King Island, the mine is less about great power rivalry and more about jobs.
I've been here all my life, so I was here when the mine was at its heyday and we had a few thousand people on the island. It was a really vibrant community, and yeah, I'm all for it. People come, they want to see the cows, they want to taste the cheese, and they want to see a little community doing well, even out of mining, I think.
The nearby town of Grassy was hit hard by the mine's closure in the 1990s.
Go on, Rosie, what can I get you, mate?
Cold dry.
Stubby?
Yeah.
Back in the day, the Grassy Club was a favourite of thirsty miners. Now, even on a Friday afternoon, it's hardly packed.
So the people went, the infrastructure went, and then the housing gradually fell apart as well. So it became a ghost town.
Julie Arnold is the mayor of King Island, and like many locals, is eager to see the mine get started.
We really think that we're probably on the cusp of a bit of a boom. So the club will get a boost. Hopefully our football team will get a boost and we'll have more people to play football. But the social life will change quite immensely. The economic life, so we have vacant shops. Hopefully some of those will reopen because it's secure now. 60 extra jobs when we have 1,600 people, that is a big boost for us. And it just gives a bounce to the whole economy and the whole feel of the island. So we're really pleased the mine's opened.
Around Australia, mineral deposits lie buried. There's now a race on to find them.
One of the biggest opportunities that we have to meet net zero by 2050 at a global level is for Australia to be producing as many minerals as we can to help with that global effort. To do that, we need to make sure that exploration is occurring in Australia.
We're going into a mining boom right now, so exploration is at an all-time high. If you look at the labs that analyze the samples for exploration geologists, they're backed up for 6 months.
Using technology invented at the Australian National University, Professor John Mavroginis and his students are analysing rock samples to see what critical minerals they contain.
Also just the cores?
Just cores.
We're really having a red-hot go all over the country at finding these things, and we're doing it better than we used to do. So it's smarter, more focused, and it's including all of the critical metals, things that we didn't look for 10 years ago, like tin and tungsten and lithium.
Not everyone is so enthusiastic about Australia's latest mining boom. In northwestern Tasmania, it's fueling new conflicts on old battlegrounds. In the Tarkine rainforest, there is open hostility from conservationists towards 2 new mining projects.
This should be National Park. This should be World Heritage, part of the Great Tasmanian Wilderness World Heritage Area.
Veteran campaigner Bob Brown is leading efforts to stop Australian company Venture Minerals from building a tin mine at Mount Lindsay.
This is part of the exploration licence for Venture Minerals, who've already put more than 100 drill holes into this catchment. And so the whole of it is available for them to put more drill holes in and in future mine.
What's so special about the Tarkine?
The Tarkine's one of the great last unprotected wild areas on the planet. And here we have in Australia 100,000 hectares of the largest temperate rainforest of this type left on the planet. And it's facing death by 1,000 cuts. The Tarkine is facing threats like it never did before. Now 90% of it is under mineral prospecting licences.
Obviously, Bob's very focused on his area in Tasmania, which is fine, but this is a global problem, and what we're trying to have a global solution. So what we're saying is that even though we'll only have a small temporary impact of where we are, we'll have a much longer lasting global impact, having to produce responsibly sourced tin.
Venture's Managing Director Andrew Radonjic says the benefits of the small underground mine they are proposing will far outweigh the costs. Tin is essential for electric cars, solar panels and wind turbines.
If we want to help achieve that and battle climate change, then building mines like Mount Lindsay in areas like ours, which are old mining areas, minimised footprint, using electric green power and putting techniques there, then I think the world will be a better place for it and we can achieve those targets. We're trying to achieve Australia's emission targets by what we're doing here at Mount Lindsay.
There's plenty of tin in the world, but about 90% of it comes from countries like Indonesia, where tin deposits on land have been so heavily exploited that workers have started strip mining the ocean floor.
There's not the mining practices, there's no rehabilitation, no modern mining techniques like we employ in Australia. So that's the issue, is that the tin is sourced from areas which, archaic mining practices are still employed today.
Ventures say that they'll have a small footprint. They say that they have compromised in going underground rather than having an open pit. Doesn't that show that they're prepared to compromise and have a low-impact mine?
Venture is not here to give us electric cars or computers. Venture is here to get that publicly owned tin from under that forest to make money. That's what runs it. And I'm aware they'll come up with all sorts of green arguments, but they don't wash.
There's no question we have some tough decisions to make. And this view that the green view is anti-mining is naive, because if we're going to go green, we're going to have to get a bunch of these critical metals, and we're going to have to do it smartly, and we're going to have to produce a lot of them. We have to decide as a country how valuable is a place, and is it worth risking for mining?
Half an hour from the proposed tin mine, protesters have set up camp.
Once we get turfed out, we will just regroup and reorganise, and we will come back in again. And we will not stop.
They're fighting to stop another mine expanding into the Tarkine wilderness.
We're just, I guess always surprised at how many people will come here and stand up for the forest knowing that this will mean a criminal record, it will mean fronting court, it will mean the name in the papers, but they're willing to stand up for the wilderness.
This is an incredibly important thing to do for Tasmania. This is ancient rainforest. It's not a place for a toxic waste dump.
The move towards renewables has increased demand for the lead, zinc and copper produced by the 85-year-old mine in the town of Rosebery.
We mine and produce zinc, lead and copper concentrate, and that contributes to the electric vehicles and other areas such as solar panels, wind turbines, those sorts of things that support obviously renewable energies.
The mine was bought by Chinese resources giant MMG 13 years ago. It was part of a global buying spree by China's state-owned enterprises to secure supply of critical minerals from Africa to South America and here in Tasmania.
We're moving into a period now of, geopolitical competition. Everybody's looking for the leverage. The Chinese are quite explicit about that. It informs their policies on technology. It informs their policies on military competition. And of course, it totally underwrites their policies on critical minerals.
When the Rosebery mine was purchased, few people outside the industry took note of the sale.
If you look at the gradually tightening supervision of just about any Chinese investment into Australia in recent years, we won't even let a Chinese dairy company buy a Japanese drinks company in Australia. The idea that a state-owned Chinese mining giant would be allowed to come to Tasmania to buy a mine like that these days, I just think would not pass muster under the Labor Party or the Liberal Party.
To stay in the game, MMG wants to clear 280 hectares of forest for a pipeline and new tailings dam. The General Manager, Stephen Scott, says the mine and its 500 jobs would cease to exist without a new dam.
We can't run without it. And essentially, if you don't have anywhere to put that material, then you can't mine. We're working in a sustainable mine that's been here coexisting in this same place for 85 years with a really good environmental performance record, and we improve on that all the time.
But documents obtained by Four Corners show one of MMG's existing tailings dams has been leaking contaminated water for almost 5 years. In a letter to Tasmania's Environment Protection Authority, following several complaints, the mining company conceded there was a pressing need to rectify the problem. That was more than 2 years ago, and the dam continues to leak. EPA records show that on 18 occasions since 2018, contaminated water has discharged into the river. MMG says these are legacy issues and they have significantly improved management of the dam.
The Tarkine is really a global test case. If we can't protect this in wealthy, modern, nature-loving Australia, how can we ask the people in the Amazon or the jungles of Borneo or the Congo to look after their forests when they're in much more dire straits than us? We should protect this, not just for the future of humanity, but for the wildlife that's in it.
So this is a mineral called allanite, and it's a rare earth mineral.
There's a group of critical minerals you may never have heard of, but they're essential for the technology of modern life. 17 metals known as rare earth elements.
Rare earths are used in an enormous range of modern technologies. Your mobile phone, your laptop, your flat screen TV, almost every modern technology that you can think of. One of their most important uses is they make the strongest permanent magnets that we know of. And so these are very, very important for renewable energy. You can have a magnet that's quite small and light, and yet it's powerful enough to run the motor in an electric vehicle or the turbine of a giant windmill. That's the beauty of rare earths. You only need a small amount of them to make technologies more effective. So just like adding a bit of salt and pepper to your meal may make to really bring the flavour out, a small amount of rare earths can do the same thing for technology.
This business was so dominated by China for so many decades that nobody really paid attention. About 10, 12 years ago, they restricted supply and the prices went up, and everybody started looking around, and we found that we have at least 3 or 4 major deposits of rare earths in Australia.
Australian company Lynas is the only major rare earths producer outside China. It mines at this site at Mount Weld in Western Australia and sends the raw product to Malaysia for processing. Rare earths are dirty to process, and the waste often contains low levels of radiation.
One of the problems that people see is that the high temperature roasting of rare earth minerals to get the rare earth elements out is rather dangerous because it's high temperature, and it's rather messy because in parts of Asia we've left all kinds of remnant material around.
Lynas has been the target of massive protests in Malaysia, with the local community worried about toxic waste from the processing plant.
Stop Lynas now! Stop Lynas now! Stop Lynas now! Stop Lynas now!
The establishment of the processing facilities in Malaysia was really controversial. There was huge public opposition in Malaysia to that. There were previous rare earths processing facilities in that area that had not gone well, and the proposal for another foreign company to come and do it here again did not go down well at all. And I think the opportunity that was lost was it could have been done in Australia. And if we'd started 10 years ago to really get serious about processing some of these critical minerals in Australia, and we'd started with Lynas, then imagine where we could have been today.
One of the biggest challenges the world has is to address climate change, but we're ready for that challenge.
Two of the world's biggest miners, BHP and Rio Tinto, have spent the last decade getting out of coal and promoting their investments in the minerals required for green energy.
Supply the critical minerals the world needs.
Both have struggled to get major projects approved, as local communities have taken to the streets in the US and Europe.
I think a particularly interesting case is what's happening in Serbia at the moment, where Rio Tinto are proposing a big lithium mine, and from my understanding it's a specific type of lithium that's particularly valuable for a productive farming area in Serbia. And that's encountered huge public opposition. It's influenced local politics there, and my understanding is the government has cancelled the project.
The US has declared securing access to critical minerals a major national priority. Earlier this year, President Joe Biden announced new projects that would compete with China's control of cobalt, lithium, rare earths and other critical minerals.
China controls most of the global market in these minerals. And the fact that we can't build a future that's made in America if we ourselves are dependent on China for the materials that power the products of today and tomorrow.
The US is now looking to Australia to fill the supply gap.
If you talk to people in Washington and Tokyo, they're really comforted, in fact quite thrilled to have a mineral-rich country like Australia and a friendly country like Australia able to ramp up production in these areas, because if you're looking for alternatives to China, you can't do that in many countries around the world. So for Australia, it's absolutely a fantastic opportunity economically and frankly strategically as well.
Australia is still the luckiest country. The last century we were the luckiest because we had all the coal and a huge amount of natural gas. And not only could we supply our own economy, we built giant export industries selling those things to the world.
So Angus, this is what we're talking about. This is a modern battery pack.
Saul Griffith's company, Rewiring America, advised the US government on its electrification policy.
What we know the future needs is things that Australia also has in spades. So we need copper, we need aluminium, we need steel to make the wind turbines, we need lithium, we need nickel, we need cobalt. And Australia is first, second, third or fourth in the world in terms of reserves and production of all of the critical things for this century.
This is about 1 kilowatt hour.
He says it could be an economic bonanza for Australia.
There's an incredible news story here for Australia, which is we will be the provider of clean metals to the world, and we'll make money doing it. If we are aggressive about that for all of the critical materials, our export industry could be 10, 20, 30, 40 times larger than our current fossil fuel exports in terms of net revenue to Australia. The opportunity really is that large. We just need to embrace it.
Australia has rapidly become the world's largest producer of lithium, currently the most sought after of the critical minerals. The International Energy Agency projects demand could rise by up to 4,000% over the next 2 decades.
Lithium it's almost flavour of the month, but it's going to be flavour of the decade, flavour of the next 2 decades, because it's such a fundamental component of the batteries that we're using in our electric vehicles or for storing electricity in general. I mean, they're even called lithium-ion batteries for a reason.
Australian miner Core Lithium is the newest player, building its mine on a floodplain 80 kilometres outside Darwin. After signing a supply deal with Tesla, the stock has almost doubled. The company is now worth more than $2 billion, and that's before it's mined a single tonne of lithium.
The water's very, very milky and murky. It's meant to be clear flowing.
Pauline Cass is an environmental scientist and community advocate.
The mine is only in the very, very early stages, and we're already seeing this consequence. It's polluting and contaminating the fresh waterways as well as the harbour with this sediment.
Unfortunately, already what appears to be happening is that the topsoil and gravel from that mining site is already discharging into a creek and then into Darwin Harbour. There are troubling signs that that's already occurring. We're concerned about that because technically we believe that may constitute an offence under the Water Act. There's a prohibition on pollution of any waterway in the Northern Territory.
The company plans to mine here for 7 years and has promised to partly rehabilitate the site. Locals are sceptical the Territory government will hold Core Lithium to account.
There's a gold rush mentality from government, as there often is for new resources projects. It raises a lot of questions for me about the nature of the kinds of deals that are being done in the rush to feed the boom for electric vehicles and the renewables industry more broadly.
Our government has absolutely rolled out the red carpet. You can just feel the excitement vibrating off them that, you know, like, we're going to get rich. But we've seen so many boom and bust things happen here. There's always the next big thing. We're going to get rich on this, and then no one gets rich except for the clever people that grab the money and run and leave us with the mess to clean up.
They want global tech companies to take responsibility for how the minerals they use are mined.
In my view, Tesla should know what's happening on the ground. That would be good corporate practice. It's extremely important that companies such as Tesla ensure that all of these credentials are ticked off on to the high standard.
Global supply chains are very complicated things, and I think you could probably make a statement that no company really knows where all of its source materials are coming from today. That's how complicated it is. I don't believe that Apple, Tesla, Samsung, Panasonic are yet demanding enough of the providers. They certainly will tell good stories, but I don't think anyone can claim a clean supply chain in 2022.
As the boom gathers pace, the Minerals Council of Australia has successfully lobbied the federal government to speed up development approvals for new mines. The changes would cut back on the need for environmental approvals at both the state and federal level.
The faster we can get environmental approvals secured, the better it is for mining. And that means that we will bring the mines of the future forward. That means that we will be able to supply the critical minerals that are necessary at a global level and here in Australia. Australia is one of the highest regulated countries in the world for mining. What we need to do better in Australia is make sure that that regulation makes sense for the Commonwealth and the states to work together, so that we don't have more regulation, we have better regulation. And that means streamlined regulation.
Our concern is that what the Morrison government is proposing to do is to actually diminish what protections are actually available under federal environmental law, rather than enhancing protections for the environment.
No place is more synonymous with mining than Broken Hill, the birthplace of the Australian resources industry. Now this historic town is looking to reinvent itself as a centre for critical minerals and battery making.
We're influencing decisions that are being made in Europe, in Washington, DC, in London. All those places are looking at this project as one part of solving that geopolitical risk for electric vehicles.
Australian company Cobalt Blue is setting up a cobalt mine and processing plant. At this open day, it's selling its vision to curious locals and shareholders as they tuck into a sausage sizzle. Joe Kataravic is the CEO.
To promote this project, we've met with heads of state, senior cabinet officials and global businesses. They all want Broken Hill to win. They all want to break this stranglehold on the cobalt market that currently exists, and we're a big part of that win.
They are promising to deliver ethically sourced, low-emissions cobalt.
Within the battery materials sector, and in particular cobalt, the majority of that cobalt is produced by one country, which is the Democratic Republic of Congo, and is processed by China. Approximately 90% of that product is processed through China. Mine is unregulated, or self-regulated if you like, in conditions that frankly wouldn't meet the barest minimums of Western safety standards.
Australia has a long history of digging up minerals and shipping them offshore. This will be the first time cobalt is processed locally.
So this is the final step in converting cobalt rock into a commercial battery-ready cobalt product.
So what does cobalt do for a battery?
Cobalt provides stability and promotes a better performing, longer life battery.
The company says it will produce enough cobalt to power 5 million electric vehicles.
So we will effectively double Australian domestic production once we're in in operation. We'll be making a battery-ready material, and that's not done anywhere in the Southern Hemisphere, so that's a unique change. It'll also allow us domestically to step both Cuba and Russia and become the number 2 global producer of cobalt.
As construction begins at the mine site, Cobalt Blue is in talks with big European car makers. It's been given major project status by the federal government and granted $15 million.
I think that the focus on critical minerals from the Commonwealth government is embedded now in their foreign policy. I think certainly what we're seeing is that both Commonwealth and state governments are helping us find commercial partners, helping us make those introductions. And I think at a federal level, they're removing the barriers that we otherwise would have had to get into production, and then incentivising through grants and through loans to get into production. I think it's a very exciting time.
As the world seeks to speed up action on climate change, Australia has the opportunity to provide the minerals needed for green power. We could underwrite decades of future prosperity, but the trade-offs between the environment, local communities and miners require some tough decisions.
This is an opportunity for Australia because we have very strong laws in this country around the environment, both at federal and state level. We're very, very good at mining. You could call us a mining superpower. And if Australia doesn't step up and provide some of this material to the world, it's going to be done by other countries who might not take their mining responsibilities as seriously as we do.
It's a confounding issue for the environmental movement. There's absolutely no doubt that we have to move to mining of critical minerals if we are going to address the climate crisis. And therefore, the environmental movement has to, of course, support these kinds of mines and mining of critical minerals. At the same time, we need to be absolutely sure that we're not repeating the mistakes of the past and that best practice is adopted in every single mine